بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين. الحديث الرابع عشر عن ابن مسعود رضي الله عنه قال قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم لا يحل دم امرئ مسلم إلا بإحدى ثلاث: الثيب الزاني والنفس بالنفس والتارك لدينه المفارق للجماعة. رواه البخاري ومسلم. On the authority of Abdullah ibn Mas'ud radiallahu anhu, who said that the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alayhi wasallam said, "It is not legal to spill the blood of a Muslim except in one of three cases: the fornicator who has previously experienced legal intercourse, a life for a life, and the one who leaves or forsakes his religion and separates from the community or causes division within the community." The hadith has been reported by Imam Bukhari and Imam Muslim rahmatullahi alayhima. So this hadith is a very interesting hadith. It's one of those hadith that a lot of people like to read the apparent and kind of run with the meaning and criticize and poke at Islam. But I mean, this type of criticism does not come from people of knowledge. You know, most of these types of critiquing, they come from people who have a type of dislike and hatred toward Islam. People who have no knowledge about the actual texts, the actual verses, the actual narrations of the Prophet ﷺ. So they try to cling on to anything and they kind of run with any verse or any hadith they read. They try to run with it and kind of try to show that Islam is barbaric or whatever it is. So, inshallah, we will speak about this hadith in great detail. So this hadith, as I said, has been mentioned by Imam Bukhari and Imam Muslim. It has also been reported in the Jami' of Imam Tirmidhi and the Sunan of Imam Abu Dawud rahmatullahi alayhima with slight different wording. But I don't want to get into the wording today, nor do I want to get into the narrator today, because alhamdulillah, we spoke about Abdullah ibn Mas'ud in the past, radiyallahu anhu, and there were a few narrators I was thinking about talking about, but it will take away from the actual crux and topic of the hadith today, which is a very important hadith. So, again, this is a hadith that some like to use to say Islam is very barbaric. But before we get into the actual hadith, the rules and regulations of this whole concept of capital punishment or the death penalty, before we get into all these details, there's a little backdrop to this hadith. Why did the Prophet ﷺ make this command of la? It's prohibited to shed any blood, or it's prohibited to shed the blood of a Muslim and so forth. Why did he make this prohibition? So, before Islam came, the Arabs of that area of Hijaz had a very this one very barbaric and very negative quality of always fighting and killing one another for very small and minute reasons. There would be times when people would be in war, two tribes would be in war, and the reason to why they're fighting, the reason to why they were shedding each other's blood and killing one another was because of something that happened 2-3 generations ago by one of their forefathers. Yet because of their pride and arrogance, they continued to fight and fight and fight until each generation slowly but surely perished. They were people of, that bad type of pride, that bad type of honor, where they never wanted to back down, even if there was no legitimate reason to continue on with fighting. So people became very desensitized to death and killing. Death and murder and these kind of things were very insignificant in people's eyes. It didn't affect them as much as it should have, because it happened so much for no real reason. So, a few examples I'll give, or one specific example, is the Battle of Bu'ath. The Battle of Bu'ath took place before Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam migrated to Medina. This battle took place between the tribes of Aus and Khazraj. Now, Aus and Khazraj are two tribes that were based in Medina at that time, and at the time of the Prophet ﷺ. So these two were going at it before the whole migration. And it was a very small, minute reason, but the people could not get themselves to stop. The leaders were ready to stop, but this fitna had spread so much within the people that it was just bloodshed, non-stop bloodshed. So when the Prophet ﷺ migrated to Medina, the tribes, the leaders of Aus and Khazraj saw this as a moment for them to really take advantage of him being here, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. They used him as a means to reconciliate between the two tribes. So his migration was a means of these two tribes ceasing and stopping their war and finally coming to peace between themselves. So the Prophet ﷺ, he said this hadith with this context. With the context that, before, killing was very predominant, killing was very insignificant, killing was something very, very easy to do and easy to look at and easy to swallow. He mentioned this hadith based on all of these different things that took place in the past. Okay, so, and the Arabs had many other qualities, such as, it's very mashhur that whenever they had a daughter, it was a thing of, disgrace and a thing of, being in ill fortune if somebody is given a daughter. So what they used to do was they used to bury their daughters alive. This is a very common practice before the coming of Islam. So when Islam came, it came to seize and end every single one of these really bad and cruel and wicked habits these people had. That's why this hadith starts with a prohibition, right? And this hadith came, and then Islam came as a whole to counter all of this, to show that all lives matter. It doesn't matter if you have a daughter, it doesn't matter if you have a son. If anything, there is many ahadith that mention the virtues of having a daughter over a son. There's many ahadith that speak about how a daughter could be a means of Jannah for her mother or father. So these hadith came to go against and contrary to these practices of these people. And to show that there's no such thing as tribalism in Islam. There's no such thing as, superiority in race or color or whatever it is. So this hadith came down to counter all of these different claims and the habits these people had. So now the hadith begins. La is a prohibition. A complete prohibition, to show that, look, life is something that is very valuable, and you cannot take life except with the following three cases. So now again, we'll get into the details of how these different penalties will be taken out in this whole thing, but only in specific cases is it permissible to take a life, capital punishment or the death penalty. So now, one thing to note, Islam is not the only you can say religion that promotes or that has capital punishment. The Torah also has very similar teachings when it comes to a fornicator in terms of capital punishment and how capital punishment will be taking place. The Torah has the exact same laws. If anything, Islam takes some of its laws from the Torah. The Bible, so as well. Christianity also has these teachings within its doctrine. So Islam is not something that is, it's something new that the capital punishment, Islam brought this into existence. No, not at all. And even to this day, capital punishment is not something that is khas and specific to Islam. Not at all. If we look around the world today, how many countries actually have capital punishment? And how many countries recently, they recently stopped capital punishment and forbid it? To this day, the States, the United States of America obviously has capital punishment. China has capital punishment. Belarus has capital punishment. North Korea, South Korea, a lot of these countries have capital punishment. And the reasons we look at, we'll get into some of the reasons, especially with some of these countries who recently forbid capital punishment, specifically the UK, their law of treason. What was something that equated to treason in the United Kingdom. And the types of punishments there were for treason. We'll get into that, inshallah ta'ala. But a recent study was done by Amnesty International. It was done in 2016 and 2017. That stated and showed that the country with the most executions in the year 2016 and in the year 2017 was China. China had over 1,000 executions. They went through over 1,000 death penalties in the year 2016. And even more in the year 2017. And then the second country in the world after that was Iran. Iran had about 600. But I mean, let's leave the whole Islamic discussion aside for now. So, what types of crimes would lead to a person being convicted of the death penalty in some of these countries? Some of them are very similar to Islam, such as murder, treason, and so forth, going against the state. These are all things that all these countries, they agree on. They're universally agreed on, that if a person commits treason, and for example, in the States or in China or in Belarus or whatever, and even in the UK before 1998, it equated to the death penalty. This was common. So now, some of the reasons or some of the crimes that led to the capital punishment. So in countries such as China, Saudi Arabia, and Singapore, drug dealing and drug trafficking was led to basically the death penalty if a person got convicted. Drug trafficking. Or let's say places like China, India, or Saudi again, if a person committed rape in these countries, they would be convicted of the death penalty. Or kidnapping. China has the death penalty set for a person who is convicted of kidnapping. Or you continue on, drinking alcohol. If a person drinks alcohol in Iran, they will be convicted of the death penalty. And espionage, spying on the state, stealing very important information and spreading that information to different people around the world. Espionage is when a person goes and he steals very valuable paperwork or information from the state and he spreads it. So in countries such as the States and so forth, the punishment for acts like this are the death penalty. So it's not something, gharib and strange for Islam to have it. When many countries in today's day and age, they're practicing it and taking out with it. But there's a couple things we have to understand before we look at this hadith. Okay, so, and again, I'm not mentioning all these other countries to bash them or say that, their laws are flawed or whatever it is. No. I'm just mentioning it because we should have some types of standards. We can't criticize Islam without looking at these other countries who are doing it as well. We have to have some standards. We can't have a double standard. We have to be fair when critiquing. So two things to understand. There's something in Islam called the maqasid al-sharia. Maqasid al-sharia. What that means is, it means literally the objectives or the goals of sharia. The goals of the Islamic jurisprudence. What are the goals of Islam? What are the goals of Islamic law? What is the objective of Islamic law? What is it trying to achieve? What is the whole point of having these laws? Something very unique with our deen is that we have actual principles and goals and objectives in regards to our law system. So there's 5 maqasid of Sharia. There's 5 objectives to Islamic law. The first one is hifdhuddin. The first one is hifdhuddin, preserving religion, preserving the religion of Islam. The second one is hifdhun nafs, preserving and protecting human life. The third is hifdhun nasl, preserving and protecting honor. The third is hifdhul mal, protecting and maintaining and preserving a person's wealth. The fifth is hifdhul aql, preserving and protecting a person's intellect. Okay, what does that mean by preserving a person's intellect? For example, when a person drinks alcohol or when a person does a type of drug, it messes with their intellect. So anything that goes against preserving someone's intellect will be deemed as something completely impermissible and punishable, like alcohol, like drugs, and so forth. So these are 5 maqasid, and these are 5 goals of Sharia. Sharia is trying to attain these 5 objectives with the Islamic laws. Okay? And again, it's all about preserving and protecting. Preserving life, preserving wealth, preserving intellect, it's nothing about, going on and taking whatever is not yours and this and that. And it's all about preservation and equality. So all crimes in Islam that lead to capital punishment and that lead to the death penalty, okay, this is very important. Every single crime in Islam that leads towards the death penalty, all of these things are crimes that actually go against 2 or more of these maqasid. Okay, they go against 2 or more of these objectives of Islamic law. For example, let's say a person is convicted of murder. Let's say somebody commits murder. Murder is going against the concept of hifdhun nafs, preserving and protecting human life. It also goes against this whole maqsad and objective of preserving one's honor. So this is one example. Automatically, the death penalty is going to be established by this person going against these two objectives of Islam. Understand? Or let's say the whole thing of sorcery, black magic. Some ulama mention, and there are different narrations for a magician, that a magician will get the death penalty. Why? Because the first thing, it goes against protecting human life. You're actually destroying a person's life. And at the same time, it goes against hifdhul aql. You're ruining a person's psyche. You're destroying them emotionally. So this is what Islam is trying to preserve, these 5 things. So all these punishment and hudud and whatever penalties, they are surrounded by, or they surround these 5 things. Okay? Keep that in mind. The second thing to keep in mind, this is very important as well, all punishments, all hudud, all penalties, they will only be implemented, okay? They will only be implemented if the person, or if there is a Darul Islam, if there is an Islamic state, an actual Islamic country, not the Islamic state like ISIL or ISIS. These guys, they're far from the Islam, they're far from an actual definition of an Islamic state. They're actually bygones. We have nothing to do with them. They are not representatives and ambassadors of Islam whatsoever. And especially when it comes to their whole thing of their hudud, how they're carrying out their punishments, they say that Islam teaches this. Islam does not teach none of that. And we're going to get into each and every one of them one by one. So the first thing is that there has to be an Islamic state. A person cannot be living in a non-Muslim country, Darul Harb or whatever it is, and going around and trying to implement these teachings. That is completely haram. Okay, the second thing, Darul Islam, the first, having an Islamic state, an Islamic country. The second thing, some ulama say that there must even be a khalifa, a unanimous khalifa that everybody has agreed upon, a unanimous khalifa that everybody has pledged his or her allegiance to. And in today's day and age, there is none. So that by default, that's gonna basically negate every single one of these punishments, because there is no khalifa. The third thing, there must be an Islamic court system. There must be Islamic judges. A layman cannot carry out these punishments. A layman cannot carry out these punishments. A normal alim, a normal scholar cannot go about and legislate these punishments. A qadi, an actual judge, a mufti, a person who studied Islamic fiqh, who has studied the fatwa, only he or her is allowed to legislate these types of things in an Islamic country, while there being a khalifa. So you see how there's different conditions before any one of these can be applied? So let's look at ISIS, for example. Okay, one by one. Are they a Darul Islam? No. They stole all that land. They killed many people for that land. That land was not, did not organically come to them. They just claimed it and stole it, pretending like it's theirs. So that's not a Darul Islam. One reason for it to never be taken out. The second thing, is there a khalifa that everybody accepts? No. None of them. Their so-called khalifa, so whatever, Baghdadi or whatever his name is. We don't even consider these people Muslim. So for them to come and say that they represent Islam is completely incorrect. So all these things have to be taken into consideration before people will like to, for these punishments to be taken out and so forth, and these penalties to be taken out. So realistically, in today's day and age, there's not a single country in the world that has the authority on the principles of Islam to take out any one of these penalties. Not a single one of them, realistically, if you think about it. Even the Muslim countries. If you're going to take the consideration, the condition that there has to be a Khalifa that everybody accepts, the Muslim leaders. Has all the Muslims in the world accepted every single Muslim leader in these countries? No. Right? So all of these things that even these Muslim countries, these so-called Muslim countries are doing, they do not represent Islam. Even the way they carry out these punishments are not with the conditions of how Islam has laid it out to be. And we'll get into the conditions, inshallah ta'ala. Okay, so now this hadith talks about three crimes. Okay, 3 crimes that will bring the death penalty. A person who's married and they fornicate, so a fornicating person who's married. The second thing is an eye for an eye. The third is irtidad, apostasy. So now, some ulama, they bring other reasons and other crimes where the death penalty will be brought into consideration as well. Okay, so I mentioned one of them, sorcery, black magic. This is another punishment that Islam actually, in some cases, actually does bring the death penalty in the past when people were practicing this type of thing. Another thing is bestiality. Bestiality, I don't want to get too deep into what it is. It's basically when a person has relations with an animal. So some ulama also say that this is a reason for the death penalty to take place when there is a Darul Islam, when there is an Islamic government, and so forth. And I mean, there's other reasons as well, but these are some of the reasons. So let's get right into the hadith. So the first type of person that Islam says will receive the death penalty if convicted is a thayyib al-zani. So a thayyib is a person who is married. A thayyib is a person who is married. So now there's a difference between adultery and fornication. Okay, there's a difference between adultery and fornication. Adultery is when a person does intercourse or has intercourse while being married. Fornication is general. Fornication is am. The person doesn't need to be married for them to be considered a fornicator. Okay, so this is specific with adultery. So a person being married. So now, why does Islam say that a person who does this, why does Islam say that if a person does this, the death penalty will be binding upon them? So now, before we get into the reason, let's talk about this for example. I mean, we're living in a society today that this has become common culture. Cheating, going around, sleeping around, this and that has become a common culture. There's actual websites today. My brothers and sisters, wallah, it's ajib. There's actual websites today that promote people going about and having, secret illicit relationships while being married. Society is promoting this. And there are so many harms that come from this, subhanAllah. I mean, the amount of harms are numerous. There's so many harms. I mean, some of them, obviously, divorce rates increase. No doubt, divorce rates increase. That's one. Abortion becomes very, very common. I mean, people who get pregnant and so forth outside of wedlock, they usually don't want to keep those children. It's an act of shame for them and so forth. So abortion increases. I mean, unwanted children on the streets increases. And all of these things, every single one of them, divorce, abortion, this, that, they all lead to many types of emotional problems, psychological problems. It ruins them emotionally and psychologically. It can even mess with them and bring them mental health disorders. Right? So these are things that Islam wants to prohibit and stop completely and remove completely from the society. Ibn al-Qayyim al-Jawziyah rahmatullahi alayh. On top of that, this is a sign of Yawm al-Qiyamah. This is a sign of Yawm al-Qiyamah, where that zina will increase. It's everywhere today. Society promotes it. So Ibn al-Qayyim al-Jawziyah rahmatullahi alayh, in his book Rawdatul Muhibbin, he mentions a few very interesting things about a person, a fornicator, a person who commits zina. So he mentions their consequences. He says zina is something that combines of all evil. Zina is something that combines of all evil. A person who commits zina, a zani or zaniya, this is a person who has all the types of evil qualities inside him or her. So then he continues and he says, it brings a lack of religious commitment. It brings a lack of piety and a loss of piety. It brings corruption of dignity. It brings a lack of ghairah, that protective type of jealousy. A person's ghairah is completely removed once they start committing these types of things, right? And the doors open up for them. The first time a person does it, now the doors are wide open. It continues and it keeps happening and happening and happening again. And he goes on, Ibn Qayyim al-Jawziyya rahmatullahi alayhi, he says, it destroys families. The thing this person does will eventually move on to his or her family. And it will remove the whole dynamic of that family. It will destroy it. Then he goes and he says, that person, you'll never find an adulterer, you'll never find a person who commits adultery to be pious. You'll never find them to be pious. Then he goes, you'll never find a person who commits adultery, you'll never find him or her to keep his word. He will always lie. He'll have this quality of constant lying. And going on, he says, you will find this person never be able to speak the truth. You will find this person, he will never really care for the people around him. He will be very swallowed with himself, only caring about himself or herself. And continuing on, a type of darkness will be brought to their face. Their faces will become dark. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will remove the nur from them. And I mean, you can see, and when you look at these people's faces, you can see the misery and grief inside their faces. You can see the grief off their faces. They always naturally look so depressed and sad. And another thing that, zina brings, a person who commits zina and adultery, it brings poverty. It brings poverty. And every single one of these points Ibn Qayyim al-Jawziyya mentions, rahmatullahi alayhi, he brings a hadith for it. He doesn't just mention it like that. When I was going through them, he brings a hadith for every single one of these points. That if an adulterer does this, if an adulterer commits adultery, if a person commits adultery, this is going to happen. This is going to happen. This is going to happen, from many, many narrations. So he's just breaking it down. And at the end he says, a person who commits adultery, slowly but surely, every single one of their good qualities will leave them. Any good quality they had, surely and slowly, those qualities will leave. Those qualities Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will remove one by one. And just to note, my brothers and sisters, there's different types of zina. There's different types of zina. There's zina of the eyes, to look at things that are haram. There's zina of the ears, to listen to things that are haram, and so forth. So there's different types of zina, my brothers and sisters. So obviously when it comes to the hudud of sharia, the hudud of sharia is talking about literal, actual intercourse. But when it comes to all of these different consequences of zina, this could also be related to those people who commit zina with their other body parts, whether that may be their eyes, their ears, their hands, and so forth. طيب. Okay, so now convicting someone of this crime. How does Islam, in the court systems, how would they convict somebody of zina? So one thing to note, and with every single one of these punishments, with every single one of these convictions and penalties, it is very, very hard to convict somebody of them. Very hard. Okay, and I'll show you with the death penalty of zina, how difficult it is to actually convict someone of this. So Islam says, the Quran also mentions that 4 witnesses must be provided. 4 witnesses must have actually seen the act of zina taking place. If 4 of them heard it, that will not be taken into consideration. Even if 4 people threw a silhouette, those white cloths where you can see shadows on the other side, if 4 people were to see the action through this, it would not count as well. You have to literally see the action of intercourse taking place for you to be considered a witness. If you did not, you will not be considered a witness. And my brothers and sisters, I'm emphasizing this because it's a very important point. If two people are alone in a room together, and somebody sees these two people naked in a room together, this person will still not be eligible to be a witness because he did not see the actual act taking place. So you see how hard it is? You see how hard it is for an actual a witness to come place, and a solid witness that Islam actually accepts. So what does that tell us? That tells us that this sin is done publicly. That for this action, for this conviction to actually go forward, and for the death penalty to actually happen, this action is something that will be done publicly. Only then can four people actually see the action actually happening, right? Again, your sight is considered, not your ears, not second person, third person hearing it from somebody else. It's what you see. And if you have not seen the actual action taking place, you will not be considered a witness in the court systems. So now, this tells us that this is a sin that is done to encourage and promote it. Okay? For four witnesses to see this action happening, it has to be done publicly. So it's sins that are done publicly. Sins where a person has no shame and they're just doing it out there. Only then can four people actually see it. Does that make sense? So it's with the intention, these people, they're doing it with the intention to, promote it and to basically, to encourage people to do it. To encourage people to do it. Does that make sense? So this thing of four witnesses is something that, a lot of people in today's day and age really do overlook. I mean, when they talk about these hudud and these punishments, and you have so-called Muslims around the world going about and trying to carry out these penalties themselves. I think it was a couple of years ago, I saw this, I was reading this article talking about people in southern Afghanistan. People in southern Afghanistan. This woman, apparently she commits zina. And based on speculation, not even a witness, just based on speculation, they kill this woman. Even if you were a Muslim, a Muslim will not ignore any one of these conditions. And on top of that, there's no Darul Islam, there's no Khalifa, there's no court systems. And on top of that, you're not even following the prerequisites of the penalties before even taking it out. So these things, my brothers and sisters, again, this is ignorance, the lack of knowledge. So if one witness is missing, okay, now this is a very important fact as well. If one witness is missing, if you have three witnesses that actually saw the action taking place, the penalty will not be legislated. This person will not get the death penalty because you need to have four. So even if one is missing and three people saw it, Islam does not say that the punishment should be put out forward and executed. Okay, so another point to make. If one person goes to the court systems and accuses somebody of committing zina, and if you can't find three other witnesses, that person making the accusation, he will be punished. He will be punished. He will be convicted of slander. So you see how these small, very minute details Islam are looked at in Islam. So the act of seeing. So we see this through the action of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam, there's the story of this one person. His name was Ma'iz ibn Malik. The narrations are mentioned in Sahih Muslim and Bukhari and so forth. So Ma'iz, he came to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam and he said, Ya Rasulullah, I have committed zina. Please purify me. What does that mean? Purify me, please punish me with the death penalty. I feel guilty. Ya Rasulullah, please, I have done this. Please purify me. The Prophet ﷺ in the Hadith, it mentions that he turned away. He turned away and he said, Ya Ma'iz, go home. Go home and make tawbah, Ya Ma'iz. Again, Ma'iz came, he said, Ya Rasulullah, I have committed zina, please purify me. The Prophet ﷺ, again, he turned away, he said, Ya Ma'iz, go home. Ya Ma'iz, go make tawbah to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Again, a third time, Ma'iz came again. Ya Rasulullah, I commit zina, please purify me. Again, the Prophet ﷺ told him to go home, Ya Ma'iz. Go home and make tawbah. The fourth time he came and confessed to the Prophet ﷺ. Again, 4 witnesses. So 4 confessions equal 4 witnesses. In Islam, a confession equates to 1 testimony. So he confessed against himself 4 times. The Prophet ﷺ, what did he do after that? Did he say, okay, let's go. We're going to take out the death penalty on you? He said, no. He said, Ya Ma'iz, are you sure you did not have you weren't in a state of insanity during that time? Are you sure you weren't majnoon? Are you sure you were in a right mental state when you did this? Are you sure? Is there any doubt? Are you sure that you were actually in a normal state when doing this? Ma'iz said yes. So again, the Prophet ﷺ continued to try to give him the benefit of the doubt, trying to tell him, go home, make tawbah. Go home, make tawbah. We don't want to do this. So when we're talking about these ahadith in class, my teacher, Shaykh Asim, Hafidahullah Ta'ala, he said that the action of Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam is showing us that these punishments were legislated not to be carried out at all times, but to scare people so that they don't do it. To scare people, to scare the society, to not do it. Because we don't want these types of things to spread. That is why the Prophet ﷺ, when Ma'iz came to confess, he said, Ya Ma'iz, go home and make tawbah. I've never heard this. I didn't hear this from you. Go home, make tawbah. And then the narration's continuing. The narration of the woman who Ma'iz had intercourse with. The woman is known as Al-Ghamidiyya. She's an unnamed woman in a hadith. So she came to Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. She said, Ya Rasulullah, purify me. I have committed zina. And the Prophet alayhi wa sallam, the hadith is actually quite wrong. So I'll read a portion of the hadith to you. So then a woman of Ghamid, a branch of Azd, came to him and said, O Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, purify me. Whereupon he sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said, woe be upon you, go back and beg forgiveness from Allah and turn to Him in repentance. Exact same answer. Exact same answer. And then what did this woman do? She said, Ya Rasulullah, I find that you intend to send me back as you sent Ma'iz back. She said, I don't want you to do that with me. I don't want you to do that to me. So again, she confessed and she told the Prophet ﷺ of her action. But the Prophet ﷺ again wanted to give her the benefit of the doubt. So Islam does not, promote killing for no reason. The next point when we speak about an eye for an eye, we're going to talk about the sanctity of life specifically in regards to the texts. But these things, that did occur during the time of the Prophet ﷺ, whenever he did carry out this punishment specifically, whenever he did, he would always tell the people, go back and make tawbah. Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can forgive and will forgive everything. But some of these people, because of the guilt they had, they continuously came back to the Prophet alayhi wassalatu wassalam. And because these are laws of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam, after somebody witnessing and confessing to themselves 4 times, the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam had no choice to go out with them. So my teacher again, he would say that these things, these punishments and penalties were things to scare society so that they stay away from these acts. And that is why they barely happened. These hudud and these punishments and penalties barely happened in the time of the Prophet alayhi wassalatu wassalam. Okay, so now the second point. And again, today, my brothers and sisters, it's more of a fiqhi discussion. There's not too many stories today, unfortunately. It's more of a discussion to do with fiqh and law and so forth. Sometimes people say that fiqh can be very, very dry. I mean, to some people it could be, but these are very important topics because we need to know how to answer these questions. A lot of people don't know. So try to follow up, inshallah. Try to stay awake with me, inshallah. So the second reason Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam mentions to as the death penalty to be something of legislation is an-nafsu bin-nafs, a life for a life. So the Arabic word for this is qisas, retribution. Okay, so this is also a concept in the Bible. Okay, the masala of qisas is also something mentioned in the Bible. And the masala of killing a person, or the death penalty going out for a person who who fornicated while being married, this is also something in the Torah. So again, this is not something khas to Islam. So murder and its severity, it's something that has been emphasized in the Quran with a lot of detail. A lot of emphasis has been given to the sanctity of life and, people not taking the life of somebody for no reason. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says in the Quran, مَنْ قَتَلَ نَفْسًا بِغَيْرِ نَفْسٍ أَوْ فَسَادٍ فِي الْأَرْضِ فَكَأَنَّمَا قَتَلَ النَّاسَ جَمِيعًا. Whoever goes and kills a person for no reason, it is as if this person has killed all of mankind entirely. فَكَأَنَّمَا قَتَلَ النَّاسَ جَمِيعًا. It's as if he has killed all of mankind entirely. Then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He goes and He says, وَمَنْ أَحْيَاهَا فَكَأَنَّمَا أَحْيَا النَّاسَ جَمِيعًا. Whoever gives life to a person, whoever saves somebody's life, it is as if this person has saved the life of all of mankind. So every single life is looked at with great importance. And also, when we look at Surah Al-Furqan, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about the Ibad al-Rahman, the true servants of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So the Ibad al-Rahman, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, in the end of Surah Al-Furqan, He talks about those servants who are very beloved to Him, the true servants of Allah Azza wa Jal. And then He starts to bring different qualities about them. One of those qualities are what? وَلَا يَقْتُلُونَ النَّفْسَ الَّتِي حَرَّمَ اللَّهُ. That this person, he does not go around and kill people for no reason. He does not go around and kill people for no reason. He does not kill people unjustly. This is not the quality of one of my true slaves, of a true slave of mine, of a pious slave of mine. So, and I mean, there's so many more. وَمَنْ يَقْتُلْ مُؤْمِنًا مُتَعَمِّدًا فَجَزَاؤُهُ جَهَنَّمُ خَالِدًا فِيهَا. Whoever kills a person, intentionally, فَجَزَاؤُهُ جَهَنَّمْ. His punishment will be Jahannam, خَالِدًا فِيهَا, forever. And the wrath and anger of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will be upon this person. So there's many ayats speaking about the sanctity of life and protecting life. And this concept of murder is actually another sign of Yawm al-Qiyamah, where Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam says that the person being killed and the person killing, they will not know the reason to why they're actually fighting in the first place. The person being killed will not know why he's being killed, and the killer will not know why he is killing. And that's happening in today's day and age. It's happening everywhere, just death and murder and this and that. It's very predominant, unfortunately. So now, Islam does not want sins like this to continue. We read a lot of stories about serial killers and so forth, and people like what's that guy's name? There's a few guys I read about. Jeffrey Dahmer. I don't know if you guys have heard of him, or what's it called? There's another guy by the name of his nickname was the Night Stalker. These are serial killers, and I mean the way they kill people, subhanallah, is just, may Allah protect us. Ajib things. So Islam is trying to, with these maqasid, put an end to these types of things and seize these things from happening. Serial killers and so forth. That is why after the first time a person does commit murder, Islam legislates a life for a life. But there's one difference. One point to note. So when a person gets convicted of murder in the Islamic court systems and so forth, what happens is that obviously you need witnesses. 2 witnesses are required to see the actual action from beginning to end taking place. They can't hear it. Again, they cannot hear it. They cannot hear it from a second person or whatever it is. Eyewitness testimony is needed, 2 of them. But before we get into the conviction, this an-nafsu bin-nafs. Nafs literally means soul. This is am in general to every type of soul there is, Muslim or non-Muslim. It's not only in terms of the Muslims. It's including and inclusive of all Muslims and non-Muslims alike. The Prophet ﷺ, he says in a hadith, "Man qatala mu'ahidan lam yarih ra'ihat al-jannah." Whoever kills a mu'ahid. Now, mu'ahid is a person who is living in the Muslim lands with peace, a peaceful person. A person who has peace with you, a person who's not harming you, a person who's not there to get you or whatever it is. Whoever kills a person like this, what does the Prophet ﷺ say? لَمْ يَرِحْ رَائِحَةَ الْجَنَّةِ. This person will never smell the scent of Jannah. He will never enter Jannah. So again, this is to every single life there is, Muslim, non-Muslim alike. Okay, so now going back to the actual process of this happening. So once a person gets convicted, the family of the victim will be consulted. Now this is something different compared to actual modern day capital punishment in different countries around the world. Usually when a person is convicted of murder, when they're convicted of capital punishment, there's no wiggle room. That person is going to get executed no matter what. But with Islam, what happens is the victim's family will be approached. And they will be given 3 options. They will be given 3 options. Now the first is what? Forgiving the criminal. Forgiving that person. And we're going to come back to that point. Forgiving this person who commit the murder. If the person doesn't want to, if the family doesn't want to accept this, the second option will be blood money. That this person who was convicted, the murderer, he will give an amount of money to you that is pleasing to you for the crime he committed. They call it blood money, diya in Islam. Okay? If the family does not accept this, then the death penalty will take place upon the person. Understand? So Islam promotes the first 2 first. Forgiveness and blood money. Just to protect that person's life. Okay? There's a very interesting incident that happened 2 years ago in the States. And again, this revolves around the whole idea and concept of forgiving. Forgiving people. Always forgiving one another. The Prophet ﷺ, when Hamza radiallahu anhu was murdered, Hamza radiallahu anhu was his beloved uncle. He was the main supporter of Rasulullah ﷺ. The way Hamza was murdered, he was mutilated. His nose was cut off, his ear was cut off, his organs were cut out. He was chopped up by Wahshi and Hind. But when these 2 people came back to accept Islam, the Prophet ﷺ forgave them. And narrations mention that the Prophet ﷺ cried so much for Hamza that he did not cry for anybody else that much. He cried so much for Hamza radiallahu anhu, more than anybody else. So much so that when they came back to Madinah al-Munawwara, the people were mourning their family members who were lost in the battle. The Prophet ﷺ entered the city, he started crying. He said, there's nobody to cry for my Hamza. And he started crying and crying and crying. So his heart was very, very broken by this. He was really hurt by this. But when Wahshi and Hind, when they came to accept Islam, the Prophet ﷺ forgave them. وَلْيَعْفُوا وَلْيَصْفَحُوا أَلَا تُحِبُّونَ أَن يَغْفِرَ اللَّهُ لَكُمْ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, pardon and forgive one another. Do you not want Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to forgive you? SubhanAllah. So forgiveness is always emphasized. Forgiveness is always emphasized. So now, going back to that incident 2 years ago, and you guys probably saw the whole thing, that this one pizza delivery guy, he was a Muslim, he was killed. And then the killer was convicted in court and whatever. The father, they were Muslim, it was a Muslim family. The father of the victim, in court, he stood up, he said, you know what, I forgive you. In court, he went and he hugged the guy. He said, may Allah subhanahu, I want you to read about Islam, read about Allah. I forgive you. Please look into Islam. And he forgave him. In court. I mean, it was all over CNN a few years ago. It was in 2017. SubhanAllah. I mean, again, this is the core principles of Islam. It always promotes tawbah between the abd and the Rabb, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Like we see with the example of the zani and the zaniya. When they came to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam confessing that, Ya Rasulullah, I commit zina, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam turned away. He said, please go and make tawbah. I don't want to hear this. Finally, upon confessing the 4th time, then Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was forced to go out with it. But you see how Islam always promotes maghfirah and forgiveness. Forgiving everybody. Forgiving whatever injustice that was done to you. And this is something that, ulama say that if we want to be forgiven for a sin that we have committed, we should forgive people who have hurt us. Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, if we can forgive a sin, if we can forgive a crime or an injustice done upon us, then surely Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can forgive and will forgive everything. So have a very open heart towards this. طيب, so now time is short. We're on the fourth, the final reason. So now this one is a little tricky. So the rule of apostasy. The hadith mentions التارك لدينه, the person who leaves his deen, the person who leaves his religion, causing disunity amongst the community. So now the rule of apostasy. So one thing to note in this hadith, right after it's saying the person who leaves his religion, the adjective of al-mufariqu lil-jama'a is brought. This is the adjective. Al-mufariqu lil-jama'a means what? The person who causes division or disunity within the community. So not only did he leave Islam, but he had the quality of causing, you can say, causing some type of rebellion in the community. This is the quality, this is the adjective that we have to pay attention to. So now, this causes people to go against the state, promoting disobedience, rebellion, even leading to civil war. Treason. Okay, in simple English, it's called treason. And every single country in the world has laws for treason. And you know, I was looking at an article of the reasons or what is considered to be treason in the UK. And some of the things I was just shocked. So, counterfeiting the Great Seal of Scotland. Okay, Scottish law forbids anybody from trying to forge the Queen's wax seal that she uses instead of signature on official documents. This isn't just forgery, it's high treason. So things like this are considered treason in some societies. And before 1998, if somebody were to do this in the UK, it would be put to death. Okay, so treason is something that is very severe in the eyes of the government. I mean, every government around the world. Because what this does is, you know, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says in the Quran, وَالْفِتْنَةُ أَشَدُّ مِنَ الْقَتْلِ. Spreading fitna, spreading trial and tribulation, causing a ruckus, causing rebellion is more severe than killing. Because this leads to many, many, many different things. A few examples I'll give you guys, my brothers and sisters. You know, what happened in Syria and in Libya. What is happening in Syria and what happened in Libya. I, in no way am I saying that Bashar al-Assad is a good person. Okay, and nor am I saying that Gaddafi was a good person at all. I'm not saying that. But look at the outcome of these countries. The people, they started to go against their government because of problems within their own countries. But now, you know, there used to be areas in Libya and Syria, small patches and areas that you couldn't go without being threatened, without your life being in danger. Now there's not a single area, in Syria specifically, that you go, your life will not be in danger. You see the damage it caused? Fitna, treason. So Islam does not want this to happen. Islam does not promote these types of things. And one thing that Allama Sa'di mentions, he says, الَّذِي يَخْرُجُ عَلَى الْإِمَامِ. So not only does this person leave Islam, but what else does he do? What's the adjective? He goes against the Imam. He starts a civil war. He tries to, you can say, cause a corruption within the government and cause corruption within the people. So it's not just a person leaving Islam, kill them, blah, blah. No. It's more to do with going against the actual government and causing rebellion. Treason. And all countries have laws of treason. And again, Allama Qurtubi rahmatullahi alayh, he goes on to this. He says, ظاهر قوله المفارق للجماعة أنه نعت للتارك لدينه. This مفارق للجماعة, causing disunity within the community, is an adjective of the person who leaves deen. These two come hand in hand. You can't have one without the other. So they're comprising of both. Okay, causing treason. I mean, going out and committing treason. So what does this tell us? This shows us and tells us that this is not am in general. Kill anybody who leaves Islam. No. This is not what it's saying. Okay? Islam, if anything, that quality of causing rebellion or disunity, going against the state, i.e., that is looked at. Not this other stuff. If you look at the time of the Prophet ﷺ, his life, the people who did leave Islam, what did he do with them? You know, though a lot of the people who did leave Islam, they left the Islamic empire. Did the Prophet ﷺ ever go after them to chase them or to do this and to do that? No, never. Right? So these are things that, you know, people like to bombard Islam with, that Islam's barbaric because these types of things. But again, there's conditions for every single one of these. And the biggest conditions, again, I'm going to emphasize, my brothers and sisters, is what? There be a Darul Islam, there be a Khalifa, and there be an Islamic, like an actual Islamic court system taking place. Only then will these things be brought up. Aside from that, no Tom, Dick, and Harry can go about and try to carry these things out without the prerequisites I mentioned. Okay, that's very important. So now, to conclude, these are the laws of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Okay? Every single one of these maqasid Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you know, has emphasized on, and every single one of these hudud and penalties there are for these punishments, there's a bigger picture behind it. It's not that you do this and you do that. Yeah, you're going to get the punishment, you're going to get the consequences. The reason why these punishments are so severe is because what they can end up causing. The result of these punishments. For example, zina. I mean, we see society today. How you know, intermingling and zina and this and that is promoted. I mean, leave adults aside. Elementary schools and high schools and middle schools. You'd be shocked. You'd be shocked at what's going on in today's day and age with some of these schools, promoting these types of things. And now we have this other fitna of this whole LGBTQ thing or whatever the thing is, right? So I mean, Islam is trying to stop these things from happening. Islam does not want these things from happening, right? So that is why Islam looks at the entire picture. Islam looks at the entire picture. Or for example, with apostasy, when a person starts going against the government, this is going to lead to what? Look at the examples we have of countries around the world. It's going to lead to complete destruction and chaos. It's going to lead to instability. It's going to lead to even more death and murder. I mean, the stories you hear in Syria, na'udhu billah. Literally, people are getting killed for no reason. People are getting raped for no reason. I mean, this is the outcome of civil war if it goes, you know, if it continues on. So the bigger picture is looked at. And this hadith comes in a time, and this hadith was mentioned in the time, again, where human life had no value. Human life had no value when the Prophet ﷺ mentioned this hadith. And this hadith came to be the whole banner and flag of what human life stands for. That no, you cannot kill anybody. You cannot kill innocent people except if these three things happen. And if these three things happen, there's conditions behind every single one of them. You need 4 witnesses, for example, for a zaniya. You need 2 witnesses for this. And you need a qadi to be in front of you. It's not am in general. And again, it's to uphold moral value. We're living in a day and age where immorality, you know, fuhsh. The Arabic word is fuhsh. Immorality and obscene acts are so prevalent. So these sins, you know, all have that quality. And one other thing to mention is that these sins all have that quality where it's to arouse the public or encourage and promote the public to continue out with these acts. Okay, for example, like the 4 witnesses, if for 4 witnesses to do something like that, it has to be done in public. And murder, obviously, you need 2 witnesses and so forth. And to go against the imam, to cause rebellion, to start a civil war, these are things that are done publicly. So all these qualities have that universal quality of what? Arousing the public and promoting it to the public so they can join you in what you're doing. So this is some of the breakdown. I mean, there's so much detail to every single one of these. I had one of the reasons to why last week, no, but the week before that, the reason why I canceled the dars was because I had so much material to go through, and I was kind of overwhelmed. I couldn't get it all done. But I mean, this is a very summarized version of every single one of these laws and every single one of these teachings of this hadith. There's prerequisites and conditions. And that is why it's very, very important. Again, I'm going to stress the quality, I'm going to stress the statement of Sufyan ibn Uyayna. He says, Al-Hadith mudillatun illa lil-fuqaha. SubhanAllah, a powerful statement. He says, a hadith, they are a means of misguidance except for the ulama and scholars. Why? Because if a general layman, if a person goes up and opens a hadith like this, for example, and tries to understand it, he's not going to understand it because there's a context to it. There's other ahadith that are complementary and secondary explaining this hadith. So it's very important to stick close to your ulama, to your scholars for these types of explanations, and to not try to give explanations from your own whims and desires. The ulama, I promise you, my brothers and sisters, I mean it when the ulama have already given beautiful explanations to every single one of these things that these people are bringing up in today's day and age. All these different reasons and all these different types of critiquing that people are attacking Islam with, they have all been answered before. Every single one of them have been answered before. So don't try to come up with answers from your own desires and whims. The ulama are there. فَاسْأَلُوا أَهْلَ الذِّكْرِ إِن كُنْتُمْ لَا تَعْلَمُونَ. Ask the people of dhikr, ask the people of knowledge if you do not know. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has said this in the Quran. It's His command. So again, I hope that I did do justice to this topic. Inshallah ta'ala, I will go through it, and if I said anything incorrect or if I would like to add anything, inshallah, I will do that next week. But I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to grant us all understanding of His deen and His beautiful religion. And I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to grant us understanding of the sunnah of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. أقول قولي هذا وأستغفر الله لي ولكم ولسائر المسلمين فاستغفروه إنه هو الغفور الرحيم.